Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this edition of Candid Conversations. I am Cynthia Maxey Milton. On this show, our goal is to inform, uplift, and inspire you. And my guest today is truly an inspiration. It's Black History Month, and he is a bit of living history. I am so grateful to welcome the Honorable Chaplain, Colonel Retired Walter Beamon, who had a 27-year career in the United States Air Force. But his ranks to the top leadership in that world-class military organization wasn't easy. He came all the way from a poverty upbringing in rural Mississippi to go to the top and to lead troops or lead in the area of chaplain in 3 continents. And he's here to tell us about his journey as well as about his new book, Inmates in Charge, Top Leadership Lacking Vision, Corrupt, and Couldn't Be Trusted. Interesting title.
Thank you.
Colonel Beamon, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we have a lot to talk about today. You've written this book, which talks about your journey. It is a memoir. You also have a very interesting past where you started as a kid in rural Madison County. So before we get into the part of your Army career, let's talk a little bit about your upbringing in Madison, Mississippi.
Okay. I was born in Camden, Mississippi, which was very rural, and I grew up during the Jim Crow days. We lived maybe in poverty. It didn't seem like poverty at the time because it's relative. We looked at those around us who were doing far less, and we felt blessed at that time during that time of our lives.
Because your father was an educator.
Yes.
So you all had a little bit more means than many African Americans because the opportunities were so limited. In fact,
Right.
I've heard people talk about, nursing and education being one of the few areas, particularly an African American woman could make strides, and I guess as African American men, it was one of the few areas, but still it was poverty. And you talked about experiencing racism at a very early age in Madison County and how that impacted you.
Yes. I must have been about 10 years of age at that time, and I remember distinctly my dad, who was an elementary school principal, at that time, 2 teachers in the school. He was driving us to school in Camden, and we had to pass a cotton gin. There was a fairly elderly white man who was backing his truck out into the street, hit my dad's vehicle, injured himself from the whiplash, but he became very irate and wanted to charge my dad like $25 a month indefinitely because of his injury that he had caused. And my dad, of course, did not take that situation very easy. However, I remember that several days, as a matter of fact, while Dad would be driving back and forth from school home, this man would stand out in the middle of the road with his shotgun to intimidate my dad. My dad, of course, would drive around him, but we were all fearful for our lives because we didn't know what he might do. And looking back on that, it was his white privilege that he knew that he could do anything he wanted without repercussions. So that lingered in our minds for many years.
It had to be extremely stressful. Your dad, a family man, driving with his family in his truck, which is the most dear thing to you, and there's someone with a gun pointing it at him with his family there and his children there, and then he pretty much didn't have any outlet to do anything about that.
Right.
How did that impact you as a young person and your perception of the world?
Well, we knew that we had to be awfully careful in the way we presented ourselves around white people during those days. The old expression of knowing your place was very real during those days. And of course, that had an emotional impact on us as we looked out at the world in which we were faced with.
And what it said to you was that your place was subservient to the place of Caucasian people. And you know, sometimes we don't want to have these conversations, or when we have these conversations, they can be so emotionally charged that we can't hear each other.
Mm-hmm.
But this is candid conversations. We need to have the conversation because if we don't acknowledge a problem, you can't correct what you do not acknowledge. You know, we've all seen
Right.
individuals who have issues or challenges, and we all have them because no one is perfect. But when you're not willing to acknowledge the challenge, when you're not willing to acknowledge the issue, you can't address it and you can't eradicate it. And every person that's a decent human being, certainly every Christian, should want us to erase this thing called racism, as well as prejudice,
Mm-hmm.
because we have prejudices too, and that exists on both sides. You know, I always say, you know, character. It's really about character, about what Dr. King talked about. Us needing to get to a point where we truly judge people on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And I say character is neither white, black, red, brown, or yellow.
Mm-hmm.
It's colorless.
Right.
And so sometimes we have our own prejudices, whether we're white or black. You know, I may have, because I come from a different era, I may see someone with a bunch of tattoos and have a thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I may see someone, you know, with, you know, wild colored hair. And actually, there have been times when I say someone tatted up, and then I had a conversation with that person, and they were very different from my own prejudices.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as people, we really need to learn to see the human in people and not judge people, not be prejudiced, not be racist. You know, black people can't be racist because to be racist, you have to be in charge.
Yes.
So in most cases, societally, we're not. And we do have to have these conversations because, again, you can't address, you can't attack, you can't get rid of what you don't acknowledge.
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting that you say as a young boy, you got this this underlying message from that you had a place, and your place was subservient. However, you go on to become a leader and a world-class military organization. The military is about nothing but leadership. So to get to be a colonel, you got to be among the best of the best. And you go on to join the United States Air Force, and in 1975, you become one of just 26 African American chaplains in the entire Air Force chaplaincy at that time. So even though someone told you your place was behind, you still had something in you that remained, that knew you wanted to lead.
Absolutely.
How did you overcome that and not let that kind of tell you your place was somewhere else?
Well, I think going to college, Tougaloo College, was the beginning of that. I had a high school principal, Dr. Alvaro Strickland. He's deceased now. But he took a great interest in me and persuaded my dad to send me to Tougaloo College, which was, he was an alumnus of Tougaloo. That was the beginning of me seeing life anew, so to speak. Getting to Tougaloo, intermingling with kids from, well, young men and women from all over the country, that did something for me. And I found my place at Tougaloo College. And life was never the same after those experiences that I had at college.
Tougaloo has a wonderful legacy, and civil rights activism and producing leaders. And even my own personal experience, my sister was in school at a junior college that was beginning to undermine her self-esteem, and my grandmother said she needs to go to Tougaloo.
Hmm.
And I was worried for a time that she would get through junior college. She went to Tougaloo and she just blossomed. I mean, she just came alive. The president's wife took an interest in her and began to mentor her. And she not only went on and got, her BS degree, she got her graduate degree and has flourished and done well in her career. And I attribute that to Tougaloo College. There are people all over the world. Benny Thompson is a well-known
Yes.
graduate of Tougaloo. There are many. I'm not going to get to
Yes.
calling them, but they really do instill some wonderful things in young people. And so you leave Tougaloo, you have a different perspective. I always say you can't aspire to what you're not exposed to. So you were exposed to something different,
Yes.
and then you decided you were going to go in the Air Force.
Yes, yes. And because we had small classes, not many, the instructors took a personal interest in us, and that made a significant difference, I think.
So then you get to the Air Force, and you find that it's maybe not as nurturing an environment as Tougaloo, to say the least. So tell us about your journey there and then some of the challenges you found.
I arrived at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, my first assignment in the chaplaincy. What I experienced there with 27 chaplains on staff, preachers of all colors, so to speak. There was the sense of isolation because I was the only black chaplain among 26 white chaplains. And so I missed a lot of the camaraderie and what have you that I had experienced as a pastor before coming into the Air Force. And that was hard to deal with 26 African American chaplains scattered all over the United States. And so we had to find a way of connecting, picking up the phone and talking with one another, but you couldn't do it on the phones in your office because they were monitored. And so we had to find other ways of communicating with one another.
And we should say this was before cell phones. This
Yes.
was before email. So
Anyway.
it was before texting, so Instagram or Facebook. So that wouldn't be as easy of a task as one might assume.
Absolutely.
I think we want to take a moment to help people understand the chaplaincy and what you all do. We all know that the military has chaplains. Just expand a little bit on
Yes.
what your duties are and what you all aspire to accomplish.
First of all, in the Air Force chaplaincy, there have usually been in the neighborhood of 850 active duty chaplains, along with Air National Guard chaplains and reserve chaplains. But active duty chaplains usually range in the 850 number. We also had chaplain assistants. These were the enlisted members on our staff, and they numbered somewhere around 350 to 400. The major responsibility of a chaplain in the military is to provide for the free exercise of religion to all people assigned in the military. So, that is to say, I'm Methodist, but I had responsibility for providing for many other religions other than Methodist, Baptist, what have you. And so, as a leader, it was my responsibility to ensure that the needs of the military members regarding religion were met, regardless to how I was able to do that.
So I think that would be a challenge because here you are to serve, and yet you're serving in this place where you feel a sense of isolation, maybe a little bit of rejection. How did you balance or overcome dealing with your own very major challenges to service the needs of the servicemen and women of the U.S. Air Force?
Well, having served as a pastor for 5 years prior to coming into the military was a help. And I was able to cultivate relationships with other chaplains along the way, which made it easier to then broaden my perspective as it related to others.
Wow. Well, your story is amazing. We are talking to Chaplain Colonel, retired Walter Beamon, one of the first to do many milestones in the chaplaincy in the United States Air Force. He's written a new book, and he's going to have a book signing coming up February 17th at noon at 2 Mississippi museums. Again, that book signing is that's Saturday, February 17th at noon at 2 Mississippi's museums. And then, if you missed that one, you have another chance. February 22nd, he will be at Lemuria Bookstore at noon, signing books as well. We are so glad to have you here. Now, he has much more to tell about his time with the chaplaincy, also how he's worked within the system to try to make it better, and what he's doing now. So, there's a part 2 to this interview, and I encourage you to come back and join us for part 2 of our conversation with Chaplain Colonel Walter Beamon. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.